evening and welcome to the program Moving Forward, a production of the Bain Grandstand Advancement Association. On this program, we seek to identify obstacles to the forward movement of our nation, and with the help of all of our citizens, we seek to remove those obstacles. We look at issues that are of primary concern to Bain Grandstand, that's home base. But we also address issues of national, regional, and international importance because everything is interconnected. And so we welcome you to this program this evening, and we thank you for tuning in. Now, over the last several weeks, there was a whole lot of energy generated by the referendum on the 4 constitutional amendment bills. Some of that energy was positive, some was negative. And on June 7th, the voting was held. And I think everyone in this country now knows the outcome of that vote. But just in case you were on the moon somewhere, we want to say that the voters of this country voted overwhelmingly in opposition to those bills. Now, granted, the turnout was low, and that was disappointing, but it was unbelievable, the obvious commitment of the people to reject those bills. During the run-up to the referendum, of course, there was a yes campaign and a no campaign, and a lot of things were said, a lot of hypotheses were put forward. People bought some of it, they didn't buy some of it. Perhaps even to some extent, people were a little bit mixed up by all of the talk, particularly in the latter stages. A lot of new things were introduced in an effort to sway people, mainly to vote yes, but it didn't work, obviously. And so we have come this evening to do a postmortem, as it were, on the referendum vote. We're not going to talk about the merits or demerits of the bills themselves. I think that has been well discussed. I think people have decided how they view them, and nothing much we can say will change that at this stage. And they have voted, if they did, their opinions. And so we're not going there. But what we want to do is look at the messages that that vote sent, because there were, in my opinion, many, many messages, some very loud and clear, some very subtle and quiet. And we are going to look at some of those messages on this program this evening. And to assist us in looking at those messages are 2 outstanding persons who were very active in the run-up to the vote. We have at my far right, Mr. Kevin Harris, who is the Public Relations Director of the Save Our Bahamas Vote No group. That's right. And then we have Mr. Paul Morse Anatoni, and an activist. And to the best of my knowledge, he was not associated with a particular group, but he has some opinions. Right. Unfortunately, Lady Sharon Wilson, the co-chair of the Vote Yes campaign, was unable to accept our invitation to participate in the program this evening, and she was also unable to delegate any member of the Vote Yes committee to sit in. And so we're delighted to have Mr. Harris and Mr. Moss with us this evening. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That was something else. That really was something. The energy that activity created in the few days leading up to Tuesday, June 7th. I mean, you could have felt it was palpitating in the society. Wherever you went, there was nothing being discussed other than the referendum. I had friends who are avid basketball fans. I mean, the Cavaliers and the Golden State, who were they? We weren't interested in that. Yeah. It was all about the referendum. And we know, Mr. Harris, that you were on the vote no side. I think we also know that Paul Morse was advocating a no vote. Now, it's not very clear from all of these all of these elements in the groups. For example, the Save Our Bahamas was advocating a vote no to Bill 4 and vote your conscience on the other 3 bills.
Right.
The other major group involved in the no activity was Think Bahamas, which was led by Pastor Cedric Moss, who did a wonderful job. But Think Bahamas advocated voting yes on one and voting no on the others.
Right.
There were other groups. Citizens for Justice, Bishop Walter Hanschel was another very active group. I think they were the 3 most active groups. And that group advocated voting no against all of the bills.
Yes.
There were a number of other individuals around who voted or who suggested either vote yes on this one and that one and no on the next one. And in the interest of confession, I promoted a no vote on all of the bills. And I don't know if Paul would like to, in his presentation, state his position. But it doesn't really matter at this stage because, as we said, we're not going back into that. But just so that viewers would know for the perspective that we come from, that it's important so that they can evaluate our comments if they know what we're saying. But we're going to get started. I'll tell you, gentlemen, I know this is a cliche, and it's even stale by now, but it's so apropos in this case. And that cliche is that the number 1 message that the vote sent loudly and clearly was that the power of the people is greater than the people in power. I mean, that's an old cliche, and it's used so many times, but it's so true, because the people in power made tremendous effort to have a yes outcome, and the people said no. So the power of the people is greater than the people in power. Let's lead off with that one message. Do you believe that that was one of the messages sent?
Well, I certainly think so. I believe that the government didn't really listen to the people going into this referendum. There were a number of signs that indicated that the Bahamian people simply did not trust their government, did not trust what they had to say, and they were not interested really in seeing a yes outcome for this referendum. I believe part of that came from the 2013 gambling referendum. Some people say it went as far back as 2002, but I'll just focus on the 2013 referendum, because that was where it was a fresh start for the PLP coming into office in 2012. The first thing on their agenda out of the gate was, we just came out of a referendum in May, and a general election in May, pardon me. Let's go back to an election called a special referendum. At the time, they were looking at December, but it ended up being in January of 2013. So the people were put right back into an election cycle. Going into that election, or that referendum, there was a commitment made from the Prime Minister that he would be guided by whoever won. He would be guided by the decision of the Bahamian people. We know what happened. The the vote no team, which I was a part of, won that particular referendum. After which, the Prime Minister and members of the Progressive Liberal Party went to the House of Assembly, I believe it was about a year and so later, and they did something that we had never seen happen within our modern history. They actually reversed the results of the referendum by deciding to ignore the voice and the wishes of the people, and decided to move forward by granting the number boys what they wanted. I believe that was the beginning of any kind. It was a broken trust moment. So anything that was coming forward would have been a very difficult challenge for the government, because people saw that as a betrayal of trust. And so as we got ready for this referendum, if they were really listening, the people were really going to reclaim its power through this vote. And I can tell you, as I said before this referendum, I believe it is a snapshot of what the general election would look like between 2016 and 2017, because the people are saying to their government, you lied to me in the sense that you said you would do something, You went back on your word. I don't consider that the truth. I consider that a lie. I don't like it. I want to show you through the power, the one power I have, which is the vote, that I don't appreciate when dishonesty is the order of the day. You should not have been dishonest with me. And so, yes, I believe the people power spoke very loudly on June 7th.
And so, Paul, do you think that the power of the people was shown to be greater than the people in power? And is that a good thing?
I think it's an absolute good thing, and I absolutely agree with Kevin Harris, because one of the things that I think we're not aware is that Parliament is itself a part of the government. It's an arm of the government. You have the executive, you have the judiciary, you have the legislature. And so when he speaks about the government, I have to include then the opposition, because the opposition was a part of the process every step of the way. And this is the distrust, I believe, that the people felt in the manner in which they voted. And so they were of the view that this was a fraudulent exercise, that this exercise did not really speak to gender equality, and gender equality issues that concern women, women who have to line up in the hot sun or to go to the court to get, for example, child support. They want those things corrected. They want to know that women who go into banks for loans, that they're not going to be harassed or ask them whether they're married or whether they have a boyfriend who could help or sustain them. Those are gender equality issues, not so much the citizenship issues, which was really the granting of citizenship to foreign people. And so when they saw that exercise, they became wary, and I think the result spoke for itself, and I think it's a good thing that the power of the people trumps the power of those in office.
Talking about power, gentlemen, we saw the power of the media, particularly social media.
Yes, absolutely.
Social media in bringing this about, because the mainstream media, the print media particularly, was, I think, unanimously on the side of the yes vote.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? Does that mean that social media has a greater impact on the people? And how is that going to change going forward the way of communicating information to the people by the media?
Well, I think social media proved that the people no longer trusted conventional means of communication.
Mm-hmm.
It gave them an opportunity in the privacy of their home or wherever they were to, number one, dissect any information they got, determine for themselves what they wanted to do with it, and then if they felt that it was credible, share it among family members and friends and push it. So social media is truly, right now, the best means in which you could reach Bahamians, particularly with any major issue.
That's right.
The traditional communication vehicles that we know today, newspaper, television, radio, are slowly losing its grip on the electorate. The Bahamian people right now, as you know, there's an accident that happens. Sometimes before next of kin is notified.
That's right.
People know about it. We see right now, because of the close-knit society we live in, people work in government agencies. If there's breaking news coming out of those agencies, remember in the old days, it would take a politician leaning on someone inside to get them information, and they come to the house and say, I got you. Well, that no longer is the case. Those information is leaked long before any politician can really take advantage of it. So I believe social media played a very important role in this exercise, but for a lot of good. I'll give an example. I remember when people started doing the independent research and they came up with the information on CEDAW and other things, they took it upon themselves to share it and gave explanation. So family members and people who were unaware of some of the conventions that we had signed on to now started to become aware. This exercise was really good, you know, because what it did was there were Bahamians who didn't know, for instance, that Article 10 even existed in the Constitution.
That's right, that's right.
Didn't even have a clue that we had made such a decision some years ago, and wanted a say in what we should do about Article 10. Should we keep it? Should that be the next thing on the ballot? Should that be repealed? Because now I know. So this exercise was very good. Social media was the driving force of communication, and unfortunately for those on the opposite side, they didn't necessarily, I believe, have the wind of social media against them in terms of their back.
Or let me interject you, could it be that they had the conventional media so strongly behind
Well, that's
them
what I was going to say.
that
That's correct.
that
That's what I
they
was
didn't
gonna say.
feel the need.
Right. Go ahead,
If I
Paul.
may, you are correct, because what we have here is this. The state sponsored the Yes campaign, and they had commercials ad nauseum. They had people on the streets ad nauseum. The print press, including the publisher of of Bahama Journal, this media house, also was really promoting this. And so what you saw was a pushback, where people say, you know what, I think that this is a fraudulent exercise. I believe that the merging of the FNM and PLP against us is also something that I want to frown upon. But I also frown upon the print media and radio station houses who have come out against what they see to be their will. And so social media was almost like an underground situation, almost like in the slave days where people were moving out and getting messages out. This was what it was. And people use social media as truth, as gospel. In fact, you're correct. They trusted social media more than they trusted the traditional news medium, and that is mind-blowing.
It is.
It's
Yeah.
mind-blowing.
It is. But does it, I mean, what you all are saying seem to suggest that the leaders or could be out of touch with the people. When I say leaders, let's not restrict it to just the political leaders, because we had some eminent religious leaders
Absolutely.
also on that side, and others. Are they out of touch?
Well, I'll tell you, the young people spoke very loudly in this process, and I would suggest that if they were here, I believe the answer would be yes. That both the government and yes, some within the church were completely out of touch again with the thoughts and the ideas and the wishes of the Bahamian people. Because you've got to remember now, this referendum did not come from the people.
Amen.
These issues were not necessarily at the top of the Bahamian people priority list. As a matter of fact, based upon surfing social media, many people would have wanted to see things that were a lot more tangible to them or more important to them. Things like term limits for the Prime Minister, things that deal with crime in terms of capital punishment and other major issues that they would have thought would have been more on top of the list if we were going to a referendum. Things like ensuring marriage to be enshrined in the Constitution as being between a man, a born male, and a born female. This is what the discussion was on social media. So yes, I believe that the leadership were completely shut out to that. They weren't paying attention. They weren't even involved. And it really boggles the mind as to how they thought that they could be successful at winning a major campaign in this era without having an engagement on social media. But then, of course, as we said earlier, part of their challenge was a trust matter. So no matter what they said, they were fighting trust. How do you now come to this person who you have betrayed, who you've not been honest with, and you're asking them to come along with you on this new journey and telling them it's going to be okay this time. So between that message and between the social media war, it was very difficult for them to get over that hurdle.
Well, another message that came through for some people was the sense of arrogance, intolerance, and even class discrimination, projected by some of those on the vote yes side. But before you respond to that, let's have a quick break. Folks, don't go away, because we are really getting to the meat of this discussion. And both Brother Harris and Brother Moss are going to respond to that when we return.
Say what? Funky NASA. You got to be jazzy.
Welcome back. You are watching Moving Forward, the program that seeks to, in our own little way, move our nation forward by addressing the obstacles, and there are many that exist, using all of the resources we have. And our greatest resources are people. And we've got two great resources here this evening to try to move the country forward following the recent, rather contentious referendum on the constitutional amendment bills. Just before the break, I posed a question to our two guests about how they felt the results spoke to our leaders. Are they out of touch with the people? And we are talking political leaders, religious leaders, civic leaders, professional leaders, because some of them really went overboard. How do you respond to that?
I'd say that it really is a demonstration. If you look at the genesis of this whole thing, I listened to the Prime Minister in the day after the referendum, and he laid out the case where both he and the leader of the opposition agreed on so many things. And then you had, before that, you had so many bishops and pastors who really made what I would call uncultured statements to many people, and even to their own parishioners, telling them to vote a blanket yes, and in some cases telling them it's unchristlike if you voted no. And so the vote itself is a demonstration of a total rejection of those leaders. And I'm not sure, quite frankly, how leaders now feel, particularly those at church who, when they stand up in their pulpit and look at their congregation, there must be almost like a breach, a gap between them, because what was being articulated by the bishops and pastors was that you go and do this, but the people went against that. They did something different. And similarly with the electorate, the parties were saying, this is good for you, you do this, and the people rejected that. So either they're out of touch or people are not hearing them anymore. But either way, it means then that they're tuned out, and I'm not sure that they're relevant for this time and moment. And I think that's very unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. Yes. How do you respond to that?
No, I definitely agree with Paul. I believe that this was a total rejection of the authority in this case, because we had authority represented in different factions.
Yes,
we had political
yes.
authority, we had religious authority, and we had civic authority. And on the opposite side of the message, which was the yes side, there was this impression from the electorate that they were being spoken down to.
Yes.
That this authority represented something that was inconsistent with their values. They didn't like that. The Bahamian people are very spiritual in nature, and they want to preserve and protect those spiritual values. But when you have your authority figures suggesting to you that it's okay to sidestep that to come in line with the rest of the world, which was some of the language that was being used, people were very uncomfortable with that. And they wanted to send a strong message. See, this particular referendum was really a fight for traditional values. People saw that Bill 4 would open the door. And as a consequence, Bills 1, 2, and 3, people weren't taking any chances. They wanted to protect what they believed was the foundation of this great country of ours. And if our leaders were not paying attention, they wanted to send them a very powerful message. We maintain and we believe in our traditional spiritual values. We are uninterested in moving those old landmarks.
Well, as we said earlier also, and you touched on it, people were spoken down to. Do you think that there was a certain amount of class distinction? It was said that the intelligent people, I had a friend who said to me, the intelligent people are going to vote yes. The ignorant people are going to vote no. And he was serious about that.
Yeah.
And that, along with a certain amount of arrogance and intolerance. In other words, if you indicated or stated you were prepared to vote no, somehow you're an enemy, somehow you're ignorant.
Yes.
I had friends say to me, and they're really conduits from other groups out there, and they say, oh boy, they're upset with you because you took that position. Well, why am I not upset with them because of the position they took?
Absolutely.
And if they have the right to take a certain position, then do I not have the right to take an opposite position, even if I'm wrong? That's what I'm talking about. Arrogance, intolerance, sort of discrimination by class.
It goes against the principles of this sovereign democratic state, that this is a democracy, that people have a right. You know, I often say that you have to be a Democrat to be in this kind of country, because there are people who have voted for, say, this administration. Others didn't. But it doesn't mean then that you just lose heart, leave the country because you didn't get your way. That's not how it operates. We all have to work together. So once the yes had their positions, there were those who had a different view, and that view was the predominant view held by many people. But what is interesting is that, yes, there was this so-called class system. You saw many people who, in my view, have lived off of this country. I didn't see people who were independently wealthy. I saw people who have benefited as a result of this country. And these were the ones who benefited from it, and somehow now they are the aristocrats. They are the ones who had all of this knowledge and all of this power, and they're trying to suggest to people that these things concern you, and the people are not concerned. For example, there was a lady I worked with on the Yes campaign, manning one of the polling stations there, and she said, listen, I am here. I'm here because I need a job. I left weeks-old baby at home, a baby that was weeks old at home, not because she was callous, because she needed to work in order to get a job, in order to pay her bills. But you have people talking about giving citizenship to foreigners. Essentially, that's what it was.
Right.
And here's this woman now saying, listen, I'm not concerned about all that. I'm concerned about these things that touches and affects my life, that I can't find employment in my country, and yet still we can walk past the point and see hundreds, if not thousands, of Chinese working in the Bahamas. So these are the things that I think the leaders got wrong, the elites got wrong, and those persons who see themselves as being the intelligence of the country got wrong. And if you don't correct it, and I might add right now that we have not had this conversation in the aftermath of this vote, where even the Prime Minister would have been conciliatory, where all of these people who were just rude and talking down to people should really come back and apologize, because guess what? It doesn't matter. You're going to come to these same people and you hope that they vote your way to get your particular political persuasion in. That's just how they use people. And that's why I believe the starting point is that there has to be what I call a reconciliation, where people come together and those who need to apologize, apologize.
Well, that is very important. Sometimes I don't think they realize how important, because a member of the cabinet is reported in the local media as saying those pastors who vote no or who advocate a vote no position need to find Christ. I don't think that a person can insult me anymore by saying to me, you have to find Christ. Because that's the basis of a pastor's whole ministry.
Absolutely.
That's the basis of his ministry. And you're telling him that he's lost. So his whole ministry is a fraud. I think that minister of the government needs to apologize. It's going to be very difficult for me to not take it personal. And I've spoken to quite a number of other pastors who voted no, and they are deeply offended. Now, if he said, those pastors who voted no or who are voting no are uninformed, that's fine. Or they're wrong, whatever, but not that they need to find Christ.
Well, you know, it's amazing because that particular minister has been very consistent in their position and posture towards the church. So there's nothing new there. But the challenge is, his timing could not have been worse for the Yes campaign. Because what people saw in those statements was not only a level of arrogance, but a level of complete rudeness towards anyone that opposed their position. And people were not prepared to take that gamble anymore. So if you could speak to pastors in such a very, very demeaning way, then what would you do to me, little old me? So yes, this minister may have said what he said, but people took that as a combined effort, because there were other talking heads throughout the campaign. When you talked about class, yes, it became a class warfare, because some of the people who were speaking down towards the electorate consider themselves to be in the elite category in our country now. So people weren't fooled. They understood exactly who was talking to them. And when you go to the media platforms and start to use the words like stupid and ignorant, because people have a view and they want to vote according to their belief and they want to vote according to their view, what you have actually done is they really derailed the Yes campaign right then.
It's very insulting. It
Okay.
really was insulting.
It was very insulting, and people could not wait to mark their X in protest to those attitudes and those dispositions. So yes, I believe that if there was some post-analysis that they conduct, if they're honest with themselves on the Yes side, they will come to the conclusion that many of the Bahamian people did not find themselves in the benefit columns of the bills. When you're promoting a product in my area of profession in terms of advertising, you have to sell the benefits. People need to find that this is something beneficial to me. And many Bahamians did not see the benefit in some of those bills as it related to them, and they saw it was simply something that this other class of people are asking me for, perhaps to benefit them and their offsprings more than me and my offspring. And so they were not going to support it. But I believe it became a class warfare in terms of the fact that people just simply saw it as these who perhaps are in the haves column, talking to those who are average, middle class, struggling Bahamians trying to make ends meet. They're in a different column. And if they took the time to hear the heart, if you look at Bill 2, and Paul alluded to this, Bahamian men, if they went forward with that bill, would literally be voting to put a foreigner in an economic driver's seat that displaces them. Because now through citizenship, this person now has free access to the economy. Not only that, but politically, could run for office and perhaps serve as the nation's prime minister. I don't know how many men would be prepared to do that when they themselves are trying to find either employment or financial opportunities to thrust their business ideas into fruition and to try to become something significant in their own country. So I certainly believe that many saw it as that, look, I'm not going to empower some foreigner over myself when I have the opportunity to put a stop to it.
Another thing that has come out of this, some of the promoters of the yes outcome appear to be gun shy now. They say, look, we can't hold another referendum. We've had two, they've failed. This country, the people are not intelligent enough, some of them are saying, to be able to deal with referendum issues. I thought that was a continuation of the insults.
Yes.
That was the continuation of the insults because the people were very clear, the people understood. And I saw that in the results across the board. Every constituency, when you looked at how the people voted, if you were to create a graft and apply it to each constituency with overlay. First bill got votes there. Second bill was a drop-off. Third bill went up above 2 but below 1. Fourth bill took a precipitous drop in almost every constituency. So what does that say to me? It says to me that people understood what they were doing, because you cannot brainwash 100% of the people. And no matter what the final outcome of the figures were in each constituency, but that's the way it went amongst the bills. So they understood the importance of these bills. One had more sympathy. Two had less. Three had more than two but less than one, and four was way down. And if you check it, almost every constituency that prevailed. But even if they're saying that the people didn't understand, I think there's a bright future for referendums, and that's the way we should go. We should go that way, but it must come from the people. You see, if the people were being called upon to make a decision on something that they wanted or they saw benefiting them, it would have been the smoothest pie. That's my opinion.
And that is true, and that is how a referenda is actually promoted and passed. It cannot be where you sit on top and try to get people to vote for a few of your friends to have a benefit. The masses see through it clearly. And so for those who believe that the masses were just unintelligent or stupid and could not see, I think they're wrong. And and they are flawed, because these are the same ones who rely on those masses to put their parties in office, and so they can reap the benefit. And they've been reaping the benefit too long. Too long. Gotta stop, yes.
And there's no question that we must have national discussions on major issues. For example, Bills 1, 2, and 3 were really citizenship issues.
Yes.
And that's a very important issue, and they handle it too casually.
Well, first of all, they were never honest about what the issue was.
That's right.
When you tell people it's about, first of all, gender equality,
Yeah.
the message
Yeah.
wasn't resonating, then they changed it to equal rights, finally. Then in between, it became a woman's right and became children's right. They could not make up their mind what was the message. Now, if they were having an honest conversation and said, listen, the first 3 bills we want to talk to you guys about is about citizenship. How do you feel about this? Now we're starting off on the right foot. We're having an honest conversation.
Yes.
But don't tell me it's about gender equality when the first 3 items you're asking me to decide on is how do I approach particularly foreigners as it relates to the citizenship of this country. So I believe that that has impacted referendums. I do not believe that a referendum anytime soon is what the Bahamian people are looking for.
No.
I think the Bahamian people want to see stability in this country when it comes to the economy, when it comes to dealing with crime, when it comes to making opportunities better for Bahamians. When, as Paul talked about, when people drive around this country and all you could see is Chinese labor benefiting and big buildings being built in a very small island, not knowing how we're going to market this to get people to fill up these rooms, and seeing that the economic pie of this country is slowly slipping away from the Bahamas or the Bahamians' grip and is now landing in another person's lap. People are concerned about these kinds of things. Where do we fit in? Bahamian men are feeling more and more every day they're being marginalized in their own country and being replaced in their own country. Referendums or referenda, it has to be something where it attacks the major big ticket items that
course.
Bahamians feel will benefit them.
Benefit to the people.
Absolutely.
But of course, and we talk about the first 3 bills being citizenship bills, is more fundamental even than you mentioned that they should have asked the people what they wanted. I don't think people should address the issue of citizenship in a referendum. I feel a national discussion should be held. For example, citizenship is one of the greatest honors that any country can bestow on an individual. It is a valuable asset. And especially countries with small populations like ours, we need to have a discussion about citizenship and determine who, when, and under what conditions it would be bestowed. Once the people have basically understood that, then if you want to put the question to them, but you can't set a referendum, cherry pick a few questions, including 3 citizenship questions, and say to people, now do that, and then go out and campaign for the result that you want. What we are saying is we need a national discussion on citizenship, and of necessity, it must include the persons born in the Bahamas since 1973 to foreign parents. It must.
Well, see, the thing about that is that the Constitution already provides for it.
I know.
What we have has been systemic failure of the Board of Immigration.
Which is the cabinet.
Which is the cabinet. The cabinet takes it upon itself to sit on every single application. This bogs down the process. And so we need to deal with that, and that is not a matter for referendum.
No, that's a matter for discussion and apply that.
It is a matter for systems. Systems must work.
That's right.
And that's what we need to do.
And then the broadened discussion on citizenship is, do we want to give citizenship to someone born under the conditions that the referendum questions addressed? If that was handled properly, people would then understand what it involves and the extent to which it can go, because it was only in the final weeks that people began to see the multiplier effect of giving a citizenship to a person under those conditions.
Absolutely.
And so they need to have that clearly understood.
I'll tell you, this matter of citizenship, I'm happy that they decided to bring the discussion in now, because I think there are some fundamental questions that need to be asked and answered. How many citizens have been created since 1973?
Yes.
All right, through these processes. How many applications has the cabinet, since 1973, approved in terms of individuals becoming citizens of this country? Why? Let me tell you why that's important. Part of the challenge I saw in this exercise is that this was an immigration matter to some degree, right? we already have a challenge where people feel as if we are going to be outnumbered in this country in some years to come. Some people feel as that is the reality now. To calm those fears and to be able to address them, I think we needed to start by giving an honest assessment as to where are we at as we seek to continue. Because one of the problems that Bahamians have, they do not want to be over or outpopulated in their own country. And part of the challenge with this referendum was it was being seen by some as a repopulation exercise. Because in Bill number 2 in particular, the wide open effect and possibility of that was just too dangerous for people to accept. The numbers could have been huge, and the possibilities could have been very, very dangerous, particularly when we think about the kind of Bahamas we want to build and who we want to be in here with us, joining hands to help build that kind of Bahamas. So I believe that because we understand that Cabinet has to be the final stop along the train to stamp these papers to make people citizens, we need to get an assessment. How many people have been made citizens in 1973? Which categories did they fall into? Which groupings that made them eligible and got them across the line? And then we now look at the numbers of people that have been born here as to how we are going to deal with their status once and for all.
Well, we're going to take our final break, and then we'll be back for the home stretch. Don't go away.
Funky Nassau, you got to be jazzed.
Thank you for staying with us. We're delighted to have as our guest this evening Mr. Kevin Harris, the Public Relations Director of Save Our Bahamas, the Vote No group, or one of the Vote No groups, but also a public relations professional.
Yes.
And Mr. Paul Moss, a very active activist. That's, I think, his predominant role. He is a well-known attorney, and he is involved in a lot of legal matters, but I think he's more an activist right now than anything else. I don't know whether that's good or bad, Paul.
Yeah, it's probably not good.
Well, at least it doesn't put a lot of money in your pocket, that's for sure, because most activists will tell you it's a labor of love. You know, it's a labor of love. But we're delighted to have both of you here with us this evening. I want you to turn your attention to the process of this referendum, ending with the debacle, I suppose that's the only word we can use, about the final figures. I mean, should we have to wait 2 days
No.
to get the figures, especially when the turnout was low, even though there were 4 questions, and that did take a little more time than if it was simply a yes or no on one question. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll tell you, I think, first of all, if it took us until 4 a.m. in the morning, we should have gotten those results the night of the referendum. Anything other than that puts the whole process and the whole system into question.
Are people a little upset about that? You know, persons who wanted to celebrate. I'll give you an example. In 1967, I couldn't vote, I was too young, because you had to be 21 years of age, and I wasn't 21. And we went to bed believing that the UBP had won the election. But we were happy that we did our job. And it wasn't until about 10 p.m., you know, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have even regular phones back in 67, when there was a sense of activity on the streets. You hear automobile horns begin to blow. And you get up and you look, and people begin to say, man, we won, we won, we won. What I'm saying is the change in the spirit of the people were like night and day.
Yes.
And I sense that the people who supported the no outcome were robbed of that opportunity to celebrate an excitement. And by the time it became formalized, it was, you know, fait accompli. And it was diminished and minimized.
Well, I think that may have been the intent, but when you look at the process, as you discussed the process said that the way how they had it organized was that only the political parties in Parliament could man the polls. And this proved to be difficult because we know that the position of the F&M and the PLP was that they would vote yes. And then you had a situation where you expected them to be the ones inside the polls to ensure the integrity of the process. this didn't happen very well because the FNM at the last moment decided to allow people to come in under their banner, but that was a disaster because many of the polling stations did not have people in, and I understand that was the case as well in the Family Islands. But certainly for the count to take 2 days, it was always reminiscent of how Junkanoo used to be until Jeff Lloyd took over. But the point is that this is not Junkanoo, that this is serious business.
Absolutely.
And if people cannot get this right, where only 40% of the registered voters showed up, and notwithstanding what Dr. B.J. Norris said about you have 4 questions, so it takes 4 times longer, that is absolute nonsense.
They're supposed to have prepared for that. 'Cause
Nonsense.
They knew they had that
And
many questions.
it speaks to something very important, that the Bahamas is not keeping up to scratch with what is going on in technology and around the world. Our voting process is archaic. Look at my finger. I voted last week, and I still have the ink on it. This is not necessary. And we should have these things done where immediately after, I mean, we witness these elections around the world. We have millions of people are voting, and you could get results within hours.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that it was also, if you watch television, you saw some tremendous stress on the parliamentary commissioner, that there may have been some directive asking him to really concede or announce that the referendum had gone a certain way without the people having the pleasure
Yeah,
to go
absolutely.
constituency by constituency,
Yes,
as they
to
were
know,
doing,
to know.
to know how each
celebrate.
constituency decided that night.
And to have that personal pleasure
Yes,
knowing
absolutely.
your constituency.
Yeah,
When they
exactly.
hear your polling division, you
Right.
say, that's me.
That's you. Exactly.
Yeah, it's almost like denying a person the opportunity to grieve.
Yes,
Yes,
that's
yeah.
right.
The No campaign was denied an opportunity to celebrate.
Yeah.
And this is why I think that is necessary, because the country has to come together.
Yeah.
Those who were in the Yes campaign must accept and must really be in a position to say, look, we move on. We said some things, but we move on. And the people need to celebrate. So someone has to organize a celebration. I think that there's one coming up.
And also, you know, one of the things that was disappointing was there should have been a live feed organized ahead of time to the office of Prime Minister. There should have been 2 speeches written. One if yes it won, and one if no it won. And as leader and commander-in-chief, Mr. Christie had the responsibility to set the tone moving forward
Correct.
immediately
Correct.
following the results.
Correct.
Part of his speech, if the no vote had won or the yes vote had won, was that we are one Bahamas. We are one people.
Yes.
The referendum is now passed. We must now move on. He needed to bring the country together. But instead, we had a concession speech from a chairman of a political organization on behalf of the government. It is unacceptable in a modern Bahamas that that should happen. The Prime Minister, in his capacity as the nation's commander-in-chief, should have taken the mantle, the responsibility to show strong leadership, to say, yes, I may have supported a yes campaign. And if he had lost, which he did, he needed to say to the nation that, Bahamas, I did this, perhaps I should have done something else, but it's now time to move the country forward. That was not done, and that is not a good precedent going forward.
Do you think it will have a residual effect?
Oh,
going
absolutely, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I know that it was said that in the 2012 general election, Mr. Ingram had invited some outside monitors of our election. We will need that in the next general election. We will need international monitors in this general election, because we have 2 examples, the referendum on gaming and the referendum on the constitutional bills, that have proven to us that right now, the processes that we've just talked about, they are not holding up, they are on sinking sand, and for us to have a fair outcome of the general election, I believe we're now going to have international persons looking in.
Well, in the time left, could either of you come up with any other messages that were sent? I mean, there are a number of others, but we're running out of time. Also, I would like for you to address, as you started to, Kevin, the way forward, particularly from our leaders. And I'm concerned about the church, because going forward, the church is going to have to play a very, very prominent role in bringing our people together, in shoring up, you know, the boundaries of our society that are beginning to crumble the church is going to have to play an important role, and so we have to come together and decide the way forward. How do you feel that that could be accomplished? I mean, you mentioned one with the Prime Minister, but there are others.
Absolutely, but I think, first of all, in terms of messages that were communicated, I think to say to Bahamian women that they lost something on June 7, I think was an incorrect message. I think that needs to be clarified, because our women voted in strong numbers that they believed that they were not going to lose anything, and they really did not lose anything that night, because it was not a gender equality or an equal rights referendum. And so I think that's important to say, because the law currently can, and the cabinet can today, grant rights to children born to Bahamian women outside of this country. They have not lost that right or opportunity.
And they do that.
Right, and they do that. And so I think even for Bills 1 and Bills 2 and in Bills 3, cabinet still has an opportunity to do things to help certain families in that regard. So I thought the message needed to be balanced. As to the way forward, I do believe that it is important for those that have the responsibility in our society to speak messages of bringing the country together. The Bahamas right now, if we've learned anything from this referendum, Bahamians are very interested in protecting the little that we believe we have, whether that's landmass, whether that's citizenship, whether it's a sense of identity as a people in the country. We need to capitalize on those feelings. We're not promoting the good things of our country. I'll give you an example. We've got a young man named Buddy Hield. We've got another young lady who's made it into the basketball profession. The country should have been littered with their posters and billboards to inspire young people. Here is your future. Here is what you could do. And we've got many examples of Bahamians that are doing well in education, doing well in the arts, doing well in the sciences, you name it. We need to start using the money to celebrate these people, put up billboards, invest in social media program and promotion, so that young people and the country can say, you know what, despite my economic situation, despite how bad things are, I can aspire to that. If that mother in Grand Bahama in 8 Mile Rock with little to nothing can help her son to become a NBA draft, potential draft, then why not my son or child? Yes. I think the government can capitalize on those kinds of things. I think the Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, instead of wasting tons of money on a foreign product called Carnival, could use that money to push the Buddy Hields of this world and others like the Shanae Miller, who's doing exceptionally well. So if I believe that there's an opportunity, we've got so many great examples. The government simply needs to refocus and say, you know what, let's start celebrating who we are, what we have. Push that and watch the results. I believe it's going to be very positive.
Amen. Amen.
Well, you know, I have for years listened to us of this generation try to point the finger and place the blame on our young people. And we are good at that as Bahamians. We love to place blame, always. And you know, you've been hearing, oh, our young people, we have a lost generation,
yes.
Our young people. That's not true, you know.
Absolutely
That's not true.
Yes.
I attended earlier today the graduation ceremonies and the prize giving of C.C. Sweeting. I was amazed at the quality of youngsters that that school produced. And I'm sure that's replicated throughout the country, many other schools. What they need is hope. What they need is a vision that they can buy into. What they need is support at the community level, at the national level, and that is what our leaders need to be focusing on.
And they need investment from,
Yeah,
from the
but
country.
of course, you see, but we need to look at different models. That old model of direct foreign investment, that's played out. We need to begin to empower our people economically. There are lots of our youngsters who are well qualified in the sciences. We should see how we can assist them in now transforming all of that knowledge into actual, real, tangible, material action. And I don't think that is what is happening. So if there is a failure, our generation bears as much of the blame as we try to put on the youngsters. That's just my perspective.
I believe we've reached up, and many have not reached back. And that's part of the problem with the generation before. Some people in the generation before grew up poor, and they were able to pull themselves up by the bootstrap. But once they got to a higher plane, They snubbed their noses and they kept moving forward. They didn't go back. Our communities, there is no way in the world that we could take 20+ million and invest in Carnival, but not have a $20 million fund set aside to invest in scholarships to train new doctors so that we don't need to continue to import foreign doctors in the A&E department, and so that we can immediately reduce the wait time for seeing a doctor in our hospital. We could invest in civil engineers, in scientists, in teachers, policemen, many of whom are putting their lives on the line, still starting at $18,000, sometimes $21,000 a year. These things need to be addressed and fixed. And unless we can show proof by our investment, meaning the country, meaning our political directorate, that we are truly interested in you and the way forward, unless we can create programs to produce more of the Buddy Hields and Shonay Millers, we still, after many Olympic medals, do not have a well-funded international track and field program that's based here in the Bahamas to continue to feed into the international circuit. We're missing opportunities every day. It's only lip service. It's all about managing the resources you have. There's a budget that comes out every year. How are we spending that money? The proof lies in what we decide to spend money on. Mr. Alcides has collected millions of dollars of that money and has yet to tell this country how has he spent $1 of that VAT money. We're seeing roads, Mackey Street, Village Road, and other main thoroughfares, unpaved, rocky. Why? Because they're not focusing the resources the way they should. You want to send a strong message to the way forward to Bahamians? Show them that you care. Go into these areas, these urban areas. Initiate day-to-day aggressive cleanup programs, more than anything, educational and job readiness and entrepreneurial readiness programs in these areas. And watch the turnaround.
What you are saying then is our leaders need to reconnect. I think there's a disconnect. And I've had the benefit of spending a lot of time with our leaders in all of the spheres, the various spheres. And they see things differently, you know. I don't know whether it's deliberate.
Political survival is
Yeah, but
their
they see
focus.
things different. They seem not to understand the reality of what's going on. So we're inviting them to reconnect with the people. Take some time and understand what the people are saying.
Reconnect to the vision of this country.
That's right.
Why spend time introducing concepts and programs that are against the preamble of your Constitution? When we talk about Christian values in our preamble, something like Carnival should never have been accepted because it's inconsistent with our values and who we are. When we could spend time on a stem cell bill that benefits one man, instead of coming to the Parliament in trying to bring bills that would help people in real scenarios that have real issues, these, when you talk about disconnect, these are the things that people are watching. Then we go and we have a referendum on gaming to benefit 8 individuals who are breaking the law. What message are we sending to young men? Break the law long enough and we'll reward you. It's a bad message, but that is what the decision of this administration has been since 2012. Nobody forced them, you know. They had an opportunity to come in and make the connection. We talked about disconnection, to make that reconnection with the people, to fuel the people's ideas and their dreams, but they decided to squander the opportunity.
Closing remarks, Paul.
Well, I just want to say that the country must come together. I think that we have experienced what I call a miracle on June 7th, and we need to be grateful for the miracle by rewarding ourselves as a praise unto God to bring us together. And I think that starts with leadership, not only the political leadership, but certainly the church. I think the church, particularly those bishops who, in my view, did more damage, need to essentially have recompense somehow so that we can move forward and unify ourselves.
Well, we should like to thank you both, and we are satisfied that there are many others like you out there, young men who are committed to trying to move this nation forward. And we're calling them all now. Come to the fore, wherever you are, under whatever banner you want to march, and let's move this country forward, because we are a great country. And I know we've been hearing this for years, but it's true. We are indeed a great country.
Absolutely.
And we just need to show that we believe that by doing the things that will maintain that greatness. And this country is relying upon men like you all. And we want to encourage you, and we realize that being an activist sometimes is not always a pleasant role, because you get a lot of flack. And others do not understand why you're making so much noise. They say, everybody, look, Paul Moss is there, Paul Moss is there. But what we are fighting for is transparency and accountability in our leadership. And so I should like to thank you both and congratulate you for your role in the referendum. You were a warrior. Everywhere we turned, you were there, along with your colleagues in Save Our Bahamas.
Absolutely.
Think Bahamas, Pastor Cedric Moss, Pastor Walter Hanschel with Citizens for Justice, and all of the other individuals. We thank you for your role. And as Paul just said, let's get now together and let's try to bring about a healing and moving this country forward. But our leaders must take note of these messages. Time did not permit us to go into some of the other messages that were sent by the voters in that referendum. But I think we covered enough.
Okay.
That if they're wise, they would follow that.
Independence is coming up, by the way, a perfect opportunity.
Yes, they would follow that, and let's get together as a people.
Yeah.
Folks, you've been watching Moving Forward, the program that just not shine a light on the problems, but we try to resolve them with the help of our people. And we had great help this evening in addressing some of the fallouts of the recently held referendum. And so we encourage you to follow my Facebook page, CV Moss. We've got a lot of interesting things on there for you, and we trust that you enjoyed this program. And we shall see you again 1 week from tonight. And until then, we say, God bless you. Good night.
Say what?